Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Modern Pilgrimage. I'm Christopher Spiro. We'd like to thank Metropolitan Nicholas, Cathedral Warden Sergei Akushin, and the Cherubim Foundation for making today's event possible. I'd also like to express my appreciation to Tatiana Geringer and Anton Velichko for their assistance. So today we are going to take a journey through church time in contemporary Orthodox spaces. And what that means is we're going to be looking at modern Orthodox churches that were built either in the second half of the 20th century or into the 21st century, all in countries that are not predominantly Orthodox. And so we're going to look at how these different communities operate in non-Orthodox countries. And as promised, we are going to explore all 7 continents. And somebody recommended that we look at the church calendar as well. So we're going to be on our journey, not only through the world, but through church time. So we have an entire year and 7 continents to cover. So we can jump right in. With an understanding of the church calendar, which begins in September. That is a tradition inherited from the Jewish calendar and extends through August. And to begin our pilgrimage around the world, we are going to start with North America. North America includes a few countries, none of which are predominantly Orthodox. In terms of the history of the Orthodox Church in the United States, it began in Alaska when Alaska was a colony of Russia. And last year I was able to go on a pilgrimage to Alaska, and I was blessed to be able to visit this church, Holy Ascension Cathedral, which is located on the island of Unalaska in the Aleutian Islands. By many accounts, this is the oldest Orthodox church in North America. But again, this is a modern pilgrimage, so we're going to be bypassing Alaska and we're heading to Wisconsin. And we're going to visit the Milwaukee, Wauwatosa area. And we're going to be celebrating there one of the first major holidays of the church calendar year, which is the Exaltation of the Cross. The event commemorated for this holiday is depicted in this icon, which is located here at Synod. The event is the finding of the true cross by St. Helen. And according to tradition, she followed a trail of either basil or flowers to the hill where the Romans had crucified people. And there she found the true cross. And so in Orthodox countries around the world, the churches and the crosses for this holiday are often decorated with flowers or basil. Especially in the Greek tradition, basil plants are brought into the church for this holiday and festoon the crosses. And the church that we're going to visit in Milwaukee is this church, which is the Greek Orthodox Church of the Annunciation. This church was built, it was completed in 1961. In the 1950s, the Greek community in Milwaukee hired an American architect to design and build their parish church. That architect was Frank Lloyd Wright. Many of you are familiar with his work, which include the Guggenheim Museum here in New York City on 5th Avenue at 89th Street. And as for the church in Milwaukee, Frank Lloyd Wright was hired to build this church by the community, knowing that he embraced a very modernist sensibility in terms of architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright's wife was Orthodox. She was known as Olga Ivanovna. She was of Montenegrin descent, but she grew up in Russia before the revolution. And to build this church, supposedly, Frank Lloyd Wright asked his wife what the major symbols and what the major elements were of an Orthodox church. And she responded that they were the cross and the dome. So those are the 2 features that are really accented and highlighted in this structure. So the church made use of quite a modern type of technology where the church is actually an inverted dome, and then a dome is placed on top of that. And all of that is on a cross-shaped foundation. So it's sort of likened to a teacup, and then you put the saucer on top of the teacup. And so the scalloping around the dome was also a feature of many of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings. And he said of this structure, the church in Milwaukee, Frank Lloyd Wright said, "The edifice is in itself a complete work of modern art and science belonging to today, but dedicated to ancient tradition, contributing to tradition instead of living upon it." So let's head inside. We shall go through the main doors. And as you can see, the entire church has this feeling as though you are in the dome itself. There are 2 levels to the church, and there are many design elements as well as practical features that are all designed to reflect different elements of Orthodox theology. The scalloping around the dome is actually these semicircle stained glass. And here is the iconostasis. This is made of gold anodized aluminum, which was a new technique that was being developed in the 1950s in America. So it's actually very lightweight. And that is the choice that was made for the iconostasis and a lot of design elements throughout the building. So this is the detail of the Last Supper above the royal doors. So moving right along, because we have a whole year to get through, the next major holiday of the church is known as the Pokrov, or the Protection of the Mother of God. This holiday is celebrated in October, and it commemorates the appearance of the Virgin Mary in a church in Constantinople in the 10th century. And even though this event took place in Byzantium, the holiday is particularly celebrated in the Slavic world. And to celebrate this holiday, we are going to go over to Astoria, but not the Astoria across the river, the Astoria across the country in Oregon. The town of Astoria, as you can see, is where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean. This is the church, and the building itself had been built as a Protestant church in the 1960s. In the town of Astoria, an Orthodox parish was established under the OCA, the Orthodox Church of America, in 2017. And it is composed primarily of converts. And the building here was acquired by the parish in 2021. And this is one of the first services that took place in this building as an Orthodox Christian parish. As you can see, the iconostasis does not yet exist. So the icons are on easels. And the design of this church was built to look like an inverted Viking ship. And that is a reference to the seafarers and the fishermen who made up a major part of this town's history. And this is the church today. So as you can see, all of the pews have been removed, and the wood was repurposed to construct the iconostasis. The iconostasis has various saints on it, including the American saint, St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco, and the patron saint of this church, which is St. Brendan the Navigator. St. Brendan the Navigator was an early Irish saint who was known to preach the gospel by sailing around to different obscure communities. And according to legend, he even made it to North America. And I visited this church last year, and I was told that this is, in fact, the only Orthodox church in the world dedicated to St. Brendan. So now we are going to sort of go through the Nativity Fast, which is the Christmas Lent, rather quickly in order to celebrate Christmas. And to do that, we are going to go to Europe. And as I said, this presentation will focus on um, churches in countries exclusively that are non-Orthodox. However, that does not mean that there is not a long history of a community in some of those countries. And so for the continent of Europe, the countries I've chosen are those which have a long history of a local Orthodox community, even though it is a minority religion in those countries. And the first country that we're going to go to, which is where we're going to celebrate Christmas, is Finland. So the Finnish people are a Uralic people. The closest language related to Finnish is Estonian. And they were sort of Christianized in the middle of East and West coming together. So the Swedes bringing the faith in the western part of Finland, and then Orthodoxy being brought in the medieval era, mostly by Novgorod in ancient Rus, in eastern Finland, which is known as Karelia. Sweden ruled Finland for hundreds of years, and during that time, the Lutheran Church was promoted, the Orthodox Church was suppressed. Through a series of wars, Russia acquired Finland in the 19th century. It became a Grand Duchy of Russia. And then after the Russian Revolution, Finland became independent. And the borders of Finland between the two wars was actually much larger than it is today. So these red zones are areas that belonged to Finland after World War I, but were then taken by the Soviet Union after World War II. And they especially include a large area of Karelia, which is this eastern part of Finland. So many of you might be familiar with Valam Monastery. Valam is an ancient monastery located on an island in Lake Ladoga. And that area was controlled by Finland between the wars. After World War II, the monks were forced to flee to Finland, so they had to travel westward, and the monastery was closed by the Soviets. And the monks founded New Valam Monastery in Finland. So as you can see, the design of the church at New Valam is within the Russian Orthodox tradition. But we are going to visit the sister monastery of Valam, which is Lintula Convent. So Lintula Convent originally was founded in the village of Lintula, which is in present-day Russian Karelia. It was founded in the 19th century, and once again, when the Soviets took over this part of Finland after World War II, the nuns fled westward to Finland and founded the new Lintula Convent in Finland, very close to New Valam. And as you can see, the church structure is decidedly contemporary. It's very minimalist, in keeping with sort of the Scandinavian aesthetic. It was built in 1973. Am I boring someone? Someone snoring? Yeah, no. It's so boring, huh? I'll try to get it a little livelier. So as you can see, it is a very modern, minimalist interpretation of an Orthodox church. Let's go inside, and as you can see, the church makes use of these very long, narrow windows, which allow for the maximum amount of light during the dark Finnish winters. So let's take a little walking tour through the church. the Konovica icon of the Mother of God, which is a particularly venerated image of the Mother of God among Finnish Orthodox Christians. You can see in the frescoes the use of this beautiful aquamarine color. And that aquamarine color has also been incorporated into the glass of the windows. The inscriptions are in Finnish. And you can see that the iconostasis is made of a light color wood and left in its natural form. Again, very much a Scandinavian design aesthetic. The Finnish Orthodox Church was separated from the church in Russia when Finland became independent and the communists took over Russia, which meant that the Finnish church received autonomous status through the Patriarch of Constantinople. It is led by a metropolitan. And of course, Lintula Convent is led by an igumenia or an abbess. And since we are here at the convent, let's get a blessing from the abbess. And today, the Metropolitan of Finland is also visiting the convent. Okay. Now, important part of pilgrimage often is walking in the footsteps of the saints and venerating their relics. And Finland, in fact, does have a newly glorified saint, and that saint is this man, Johannes Vasiliepoika Karhapa, or in Russian it would be Ivan Vasilievich. Um, Johannes Karhapa was born in the late 19th century in Finnish Karelia of a Finnish family that was Orthodox. From a young age, he preserved a very pious nature. And as he grew up, this was when Finland was still a Grand Duchy of Russia, but there was a strong Finnish nationalist movement taking place. And that movement really encouraged Lutheranism. And the Lutherans set up many schools in Karelia in an attempt to convert people to Lutheranism. And so he felt that as an Orthodox Christian, it was his duty to teach the faith to the youth of Finland who were Orthodox. And so he set up a school in the village which he lived, which is called Sonkajanranta. And he was involved in various Orthodox brotherhoods and was engaged as an educator. He set up the schools to be taught in the Finnish language because many Orthodox people were accused by the Finnish nationalists of engaging in Russification. So throughout his life, you really see a devotion to the Orthodox faith and not engagement in politics. Nonetheless, because of the time frame in which he lived, after the Russian Revolution, Finland became an independent country, but it was also going through a civil war. And because he had developed a lot of enemies for the schools that he set up, he was arrested by a nationalist group called the White Guard, and he was murdered. He didn't even have a trial. He was glorified as a saint in the Finnish Orthodox Church in 2019 as Johannes of Sonkajanranta. So let's see. Actually, his story was made into a documentary film by the Finnish filmmaker Mikko Kainonen. And this is a little excerpt from that film. What you will see is the church in Sonkajanranta, which St. Johannes attended. You will hear the choir singing in the Karelian style of liturgical worship. And at the end, we will hear from the starosta, the warden of the church in Sonkajanranta, as he talks a little bit about St. Johannes.
Johannes Karhapää toimin vuosia alussa kotikylässäni Tuupovaaran Sonkajanrannalla ja oli uskon opettaja ja hyvin aktiivinen ortodoksi.
Now, the only word I understood of that was orthodoxy. But the starosta has brought us to the grave of St. Johannes. In 2019, when St. Johannes was glorified, it was decided for various reasons that the relics would not be exhumed. So again, as we are on a pilgrimage, we will venerate his relics here in the cemetery in which he was buried. It has become an annual pilgrimage event among a growing number of Finnish Orthodox Christians to visit regularly his grave. And again, since we are celebrating Christmas in Finland, we are having an experience on the grounds of Lintula Convent. One of the most known traditions associated with Christmas in many parts of the world is caroling. And carols are songs which are non-liturgical, so they were not traditionally sung during the church liturgy. But they were nonetheless songs about the Nativity of Christ that people would sing in this festive time of year. So now we're going to experience Christmas in Finland, and you'll hear a tune that is very familiar, but of course the words are in Finnish. Continuing on our pilgrimage, we are going to leave Finland and fly over to Asia. And specifically, we are going to visit Japan. So many of you might have been at my earlier presentation on St. Nicholas of Japan. For those of you who were not, you would have learned that St. Nicholas founded the Japanese Orthodox Church in the 19th century, which received autonomous status from Russia in the 20th century. Japan is composed of about 150 million people, I believe. The number of Orthodox Christians today is about 40,000. Feofania, wake up. Uh, I'm trying to keep it exciting. But thank you. So for those of you who were at my earlier presentation, you'll remember that we went on a mini pilgrimage of some of the churches in Japan. But one of the churches that we did not visit was the church in Nagoya. So Nagoya is a city about halfway between Osaka and Tokyo. The community dates back to the 1870s. This is a photograph from 1926. The congregation worshipped in a variety of buildings over the course of the 20th century. And the Nagoya parish is one of the more successful parishes in Japan. Many parishes are experiencing dwindling numbers, but the Nagoya parish is actually growing. That is attributed to two factors. One is that it's a very family-oriented parish, so you have a lot of families with a lot of kids, which is something rather unusual in Japan today. And you also have a lot of foreign workers from Orthodox countries who receive work visas to work in the city of Nagoya, particularly from Russia, Ukraine, and Romania. So it was decided in the early 21st century to build a new church, and that church was completed in 2010. It is dedicated to, as you can see here, the Epiphany of Christ, or Theophany. As you can see, it is located in a rather quiet residential area of a major city like Nagoya. And you might recognize the design. This is actually a very modern reinterpretation of the Church of the Intercession on the Nerl. This is a medieval stone church in Russia from the 12th century, located in Bogolyubova. And it was reinterpreted for the Nagoya parish, but it is constructed out of reinforced concrete and makes use of anti-earthquake technology. Let's head inside. As you can see, the church is also very streamlined, in keeping with a particular aesthetic of Japanese design. It makes use of local Japanese cedar wood, and it is the Church of the Epiphany, and we've arrived just in time to celebrate the Epiphany, which is the baptism of Christ. This is a modern icon of the Epiphany by the Polish Orthodox iconographer Jerzy Nowosielski, or Nowosielski in Polish. We're going to come back to him, but we'll be celebrating the Epiphany in Nagoya, which is, again, the patronal feast of the parish. As you can see, the choir director is decked out in her kimono. The winter light is coming in, and Father Gregory is conducting the blessing of the water after the liturgy outside. Now, the Feast of the Epiphany, which is January 19th, coincides with the Japanese tradition of mochiyuki, which is the making of mochi. So mochi are these sweet glutinous rice cakes. These are large ones for New Year's. So with the coming of the new year, there is a tradition to ask for blessings for a good harvest of rice in the new year. And part of the tradition associated with that desire for a good harvest is the pounding of the rice to make mochi. So this is the pounding of the sweet glutinous rice to make mochi in front of a Shinto shrine. But the tradition is observed at the Epiphany Church in Nagoya after the blessing of the water. So here you have Father Gregory participating in the pounding of the rice for mochitsuki. Mochitsuki, I'm not sure. I want to be relentlessly factual here. So it's mochitsuki is this tradition. You can see the wooden mallet that is used to conduct this tradition. And speaking of St. Nicholas of Japan, we are going to go to Africa. And that is because in Africa, there is one of the few churches dedicated to St. Nicholas of Japan, which is located in the town of Johannesburg. So the parish community was founded in 1987, and the church was completed in 1990. The church follows the OCA tradition, the Orthodox Church of America's liturgical and musical tradition, which itself comes out of the Russian tradition. The primary language used is English, but the parish also uses Slavonic, Greek, and even Afrikaans. The Church of Africa has its roots in apostolic times, specifically in Egypt, and the Patriarch of Alexandria had control over the entire continent until 2022, when things got a little more complicated. But we're going to step into the church here in Johannesburg. As you can see, St. Nicholas of Japan appears on the left on the iconostasis. This is the parish priest, his wife and children, with an African bishop. And since we are here in February, we will actually be celebrating the parish feast, St. Nicholas of Japan, commemorated on February 16th, which is also the namesday of our Metropolitan of the Church Abroad. This icon was painted or written by a local iconographer in Africa. And as you can see, it contains a small relic of St. Nicholas of Japan. And since we are in the southern hemisphere, we are going to head across the Atlantic Ocean to South America. So in my research, I found that many churches in South America are very much in the style of the mother churches. And it seems like this is a phenomenon where immigrants really wanted to preserve a little piece of home in their religious buildings. So that includes the Rokor Russian Church Abroad Parish of the Holy Trinity, which is located in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And this was built in 1901, and again, very much in traditional Russian Orthodox architecture. But this phenomenon of keeping a little piece of home at your spiritual home abroad was not just a phenomenon in the early 20th century, but also in the late 20th century, as is the case with this church built in 1999. This is the Church of Saints Constantine and Helen. It is a Romanian Orthodox church. And it incorporates the architecture of Maramureș County in Transylvania. So the church is made completely out of wood that was brought over from Romania. There are no nails. It was made with this traditional technique. And the inspiration for the church in Caracas, Venezuela, is this church, which is in a Romanian village in Maramureș County. This church dates back to the early 18th century. And once again, you have a Romanian village, and then you have Caracas, Venezuela. So very, very much a piece of home for the Romanian community in Venezuela. The exterior of the church is decorated with icons, which is a Romanian tradition. And the iconostasis also follows many of the design conventions of traditional Romanian churches. And since we're in South America, we might as well go even further south to Antarctica. So Antarctica is administered by many countries according to the Antarctic Treaty of 1959. And many scientific research bases are located on Antarctica, maintained by various countries. There are many research bases that are American. There are also many research bases that are Russian. And it is close to one of the Russian bases that Holy Trinity Church was built. So it was a dream of the late Patriarch Alexei of Moscow to build a church in Antarctica. It was also a desire of some of the researchers in Antarctica. And so collection was taken up in the 1990s, and the church was completed in 2004. As you can see, this church also follows a certain style of traditional Russian wooden architecture. The wood was brought from Russia, and the building was reassembled when all of the construction material arrived by boat in Antarctica. It is located fairly close to the water on a hill. It can accommodate 30 to 40 people. It has seen various activity, including liturgies, baptisms, and even a wedding. It has a collection of bells. So this is a testament to the faith of the Russian people, and even in such harsh circumstances, even when there are so few people, the concept of creating a church was realized here in the 21st century. So it is quite remarkable if you can ever get down there. I haven't been yet, but it's worthwhile. And so now we're going to we're going to breeze through Great Lent, the Lenten period, and we're going to celebrate Easter. And we are going to return to Europe once again, to another country that is not predominantly Orthodox, but has a important historic Orthodox population, and that country is Albania. So Albania historically was part of the Byzantine Empire, and as a result, you have many ancient churches, specifically in the southern part of Albania, including this church dedicated to the Dormition, the foundation of which was built by Emperor Justinian in the 6th century. However, after the fall of the Byzantine Empire, Albania came under the control of the Ottoman Turkish Empire, and over the course of hundreds of years, much of the population converted to Islam. In the early 20th century, the population was roughly 70% Muslim, 20% Orthodox, and 10% Catholic. Albania faced a very severe communist regime under Enver Hoxha, who closed every single religious institution. But since the collapse of communism, the numbers have come up again, and it's roughly the same, according to many statistics, about 20% Orthodox. The Albanian Orthodox Church received autocephaly in the 1930s and is led by Archbishop Ioanni today. So we are going to visit the newly built Orthodox Cathedral in the capital, which is Tirana. This church was completed in 2012, and it was designed by the American architect Stephen Papadatos. Of note, here you can see the blue dome with the golden equilateral cross, And you can also take note of this rather unusual bell tower. This bell tower was designed by the late Archbishop of Albania, Anastasios, and it incorporates a design element which looks like 4 candles, and those 4 candles symbolize the 4 evangelists. And at nighttime, you can really get a sense of what he imagined for the bell tower, the gospel light represented through these candles from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And as you can see, the use of modern lighting is a very important design element for this church at nighttime. So let's step in through the western arch, the large dome with Christ, and in the eastern arch is the iconostasis. The church can comfortably accommodate about 1,500 people. As you can see, there is a second level. And as I said, we're going to celebrate Easter here. And some people have asked me about the tradition of dyeing Easter eggs. This is, in fact, a very early Christian tradition, specifically of dyeing Easter eggs red. According to tradition, Mary Magdalene, after the resurrection, presented a red egg to Emperor Tiberius of Rome. And it was meant to symbolize the world covered in the blood of Christ, but there's a new life within, and thus it also reflects Christ being resurrected out of the tomb. The tradition of decorating Easter eggs covers a wide variety of designs. Maybe some of you will recognize from my own Easter egg collection, eggs that have overt religious design, eggs that have designs from nature and folklore, such as these wax resist dyed Ukrainian eggs. And this is an example of a modern egg, which recreates a painting by Kandinsky on a turkey eggshell. And so, there are many decorative eggs that are not overtly dedicated to the resurrection. And yet, in most languages, the word Easter or Pascha is incorporated into the term for these decorative eggs. So even if people don't immediately recognize the religious sense, you still have that Christian context for decorated eggs, as we continue to call them Easter eggs. And we will be celebrating Easter here in Tirana. Thanks to drone technology, you can see Easter night at the cathedral. Thousands of people attend the resurrection service. And since we're in Albania, we will listen to the Paschal Troparion sung in Albanian, according to the Albanian tradition of Byzantine chant, as it is sung in the cathedral. Okay, and our next stop is across the world, the continent of Oceania, and specifically Australia. And we're going to visit a church in a suburban area of Melbourne. So the presence of Russians in Melbourne dates back to the late 19th century. We are going to explore this church, which is Holy Protection Cathedral. It is a parish of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. This parish was incorporated in 1949. And for decades, the parish worked on completing this church itself, meaning the parish itself raised the funds, and many parishioners literally built the church brick by brick. So this is a reflection of the dedication of a parish and what a parish community can accomplish. The church was finally completed in 2006. And as you can see, this church follows traditional Russian architecture, specifically 17th century architecture from the Yaroslavl region of Russia. The interior does incorporate this circular Byzantine chandelier. Much of the frescoes have inscription in English. And the holiday we're going to be celebrating in Australia is Pentecost. Pentecost, also known as Holy Trinity Sunday in the Orthodox tradition, Troitsa, is the 50th day after Easter. And many people have asked me about the tradition of decorating churches with greenery. And this tradition actually is a fulfillment of the tradition as it was preserved by the Jews for the holiday of Shavuot. So Shavuot is the 50th day after Passover, and it commemorates the receiving of the law of God by Moses. And according to tradition, there was a flowering of creation, that the Sinai desert all of a sudden began to bloom and sprout greenery. And in the same way, Pentecost for the Orthodox Church is the 50th day after Easter. And once again, a flowering of creation with what is received by the apostles, which is the Holy Spirit. So here we have at Synod, again, greenery decorated throughout the church. And the color of choice for attire is green, not only for clergy, but also for lay people. And so now we're going to continue our pilgrimage. We're going to return to Europe, to another country that is not predominantly Orthodox, but has a long history of an Orthodox presence. That country is Poland. Poland has a long, complicated history. At one time, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was much larger than modern-day Poland, and it included parts of Belarus, Ukraine, and Lithuania. So really, since the Great Schism, there has been an Orthodox presence in Poland. Poland was later partitioned. A third of it went to Russia. After World War I, Poland became an independent country. Again, it was actually much larger than it is today. But after World War II, the Soviet Union annexed various areas that are today part of Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine. However, present-day Poland, specifically the very eastern part, does have an Orthodox presence, numbering about 500,000 people, which makes it the second largest religion in Poland, second to Catholicism. Many of the people today who are Orthodox in Poland do self-identify as Polish. Many have ancestry that includes Ukrainian, Belarusian, Carpatho-Rusin, and Russian ancestors. On our pilgrimage today, we are going to focus exclusively on one region of Poland, which is known as the Podlaski Voivodeship, or the Podlaski region, also known as Podlasie. So all the churches are in this northeastern part of Poland. And the first church we're going to visit is the Holy Trinity Cathedral in the town of Hajnówka. Hajnówka is a town in the Podlaski region, fairly close to Belarus and close to Białowieża Forest, or Białowieża Forest in Polish. And this church was designed by two Polish Orthodox architects, Aleksander Grigorowicz and Jerzy Nowosielski. It began in 1974 to be built, and it was completed in the 1990s. And I felt I had to elaborate a little on the context to how this church was built, as well as many other churches in Poland. So during the communist period, really there were no new churches built in the Soviet Union. It was not possible. However, many new churches were built in Poland under communism. And that really had to do with the fact that the government was a little less strict than in the Soviet Union, but also because the people um, very actively preserved religion, both Catholicism and Orthodoxy, as kind of a protest against the communist government. So, um, as a result, you also had many intellectuals, many professors who really were quite pious and felt that their faith was a protest against the communist regime. So, at the time in Poland, again, you had many intellectuals getting involved in the building of churches, avant garde architects and artists. You also had issues with how a church could be built under communism, because the government, of course, did try to limit the building of new churches and would crack down on design features. There was a need for new churches built because in the course of the second half of the 20th century, a lot of people were moving from rural areas of Poland to larger towns and cities. So there was a need for new churches, but it was very hard to get building permits from the communist government, and there were also limits on the available um, uh, materials, because any classically designed church would probably not get a building permit. And again, certain resources just weren't available. And so all of these factors kind of combine to render these kinds of very modernist Orthodox churches in Poland. Again, because many resources were limited, you have the Hajnówka church made out of these concrete shells. Concrete was one of the few building materials that could be used for a church. And again, it was not a classical church, but a reinterpretation of a traditional Orthodox church. The interior is also quite unusual. You have these three arches in which there is the royal doors and the two deacons' doors. A close-up shows that the icons on the iconostasis are actually mosaic created out of small pieces of ceramic. And of note is this very unusual cross-shaped chandelier. It is one of the few large stained glass chandeliers in an Orthodox cathedral, decorated with saints. Here's a little bit of a close-up. The Hajnówka Church hosts the International Festival of Orthodox Music, which brings Orthodox choirs from all over the world to participate. And so we're going to continue to visit a few of the modern churches in the Podlaskie region. We're going to go to the capital of the Podlaskie region, which is the city of Białystok. This is the Church of the Holy Spirit. It was completed in 1999. It is the largest Orthodox church in Poland. And as you can see, both the church and the bell tower have this sort of flame feature in its design. And that reflects its patronage as the Church of the Holy Spirit and the tongues of fire that descended on the apostles. The interior, as you can see, the church can accommodate about 3,000 worshipers with frescoes throughout. Another Orthodox church, the Church of the Resurrection, also in Białystok, completed in 1994. You can see here in the recessed areas of the roof, you have windows to bring in additional light. And around the perimeter of the church, you have the equilateral cross-shaped windows, which bring in this sort of unique light feature. And the sort of serene style of the icons really bring a sort of calming effect in this church. This church was designed by the same architect as the previous church, Jerzy Uszynowicz, another Polish Orthodox architect. This church was completed in 2010. It's in the town of Bielsk Podlaski, and I believe just last year, the bell tower addition was completed. And here you see this very modernist breezeway between the church and the bell tower, covered in glass. And of course, this unusual feature, the glass dome. The interior of this church is rather traditional. However, the modernist element of Orthodox churches in Poland does not extend merely to the architecture, but also in many cases to the art itself inside, the iconography. And that can largely be attributed to this iconographer. This is the Polish Orthodox Jerzy Nowosielski. He was an iconographer, an architect, a professor of art, and a lay Orthodox theologian. You can see some of his work in the book at the back of this room. We'll take a look here at one of his icons. As you can see, he really pares down the image to really focus on the essential elements. He makes very limited use of gold, but he does use many other colors. And also, the painterly element here, it's almost like watercolor, so that you do see the grain of the wood. So it sort of brings the invisible, very close to the structure of the church. And we're going to look at one of his greatest masterpieces, which is the Church of St. Nicholas in Michałowo. Michałowo is another town in the Podlaski region. And in this case, the architecture is quite traditional Russian. However, the interior was designed and executed by Nowosielski with his mentor. And it is an outstanding example of Nowosielski's polychrome. Again, he used gold very sparingly, but made use of a variety of colors and design elements. He would often incorporate these ancient Slavic and folk elements into the design. Again, you see here the grain of the wood underneath, this sort of painterly element in terms of how he renders the angels and saints in the icons. The polychrome extends not only in the nave, but also into the narthex of the church over here, as you will begin to see. And I think particularly outstanding are the images on the western wall of the nave. This is a close-up. The image is the warrior saints. So here you see St. George with the dragon and this lovely green background. And this is the dome, unusually depicting the Holy Spirit as a dove. And so while we're in Poland, we are going to be celebrating the next major holiday in the church calendar year, which is the Transfiguration. The Transfiguration is celebrated on August 19th, which is a time of the traditional harvest in Europe and the Middle East. So it is a time in the Mediterranean and Greek world when people would traditionally bring grapes to be blessed. In the Slavic tradition, it is generally more common to bring apples for blessing. But in the modern world, you can bring all sorts of fruit. So this was here at Synod last year, where we have pineapples and lemons. But we are going to observe a unique tradition for Transfiguration here in Poland. we're going to make a pilgrimage to Mount Grabarka. So Mount Grabarka is actually a hill located in the forests of the Podlaski region. Its association with the Transfiguration dates back to the 13th century when the Tatars invaded the area and a miraculous icon of Christ was brought into the forest and up to this hill, and it was saved from the invaders. In 1710, there was a cholera epidemic in this region, and a man received a vision to go up to Mount Grabarka to pray with a group of other locals. And they did so, and almost immediately the cholera epidemic stopped. So since then, it became a regular pilgrimage site associated with the Transfiguration. A chapel existed on Mount Grabarka in the early 1700s. A larger church was completed in the 19th century. However, again, modern pilgrimage. Unfortunately, the original church from the 19th century was destroyed in an arson attack in 1990. So this church was actually completed in 1998 according to the original design with some modifications. And what's interesting about the construction of this building is it's really kind of the opposite of what we're used to in America, where you have the facades of buildings often made out of brick, even sometimes fake brick, and the actual structure is made out of wood. In the case of the Church of the Transfiguration on Mount Grabarka, the church structure is actually made out of brick today, which was a request of the local community in case there is ever another arson attack. But the exterior is made of wood in keeping with the original design. Inside, once again, the walls and ceiling were designed and executed by Polish iconographer Jerzy Nowosielski. So the tradition that is unique to Mount Grabarka associated with the Transfiguration is a pilgrimage which occurs on the holiday. Tens of thousands of people attend from all over the world. In the case of Poland, you have groups of people who generally travel by foot to Mount Grabarka from all different towns and cities. Last year, there were over 300 people alone just coming from the city of Bialystok, which is about 100 kilometers from Mount Grabarka. So it's I think, a 5-day affair where they do about 20 kilometers per day. And so pilgrims carry crosses and walk through the various cities and towns on their way to Mount Grabarka. They also pass through very rural regions. They have to contend with all sorts of weather conditions. And they finally make their way to the foot of Mount Grabarka. And then once they ascend Mount Grabarka, it is the pious custom to process around the church 3 times on one's knees. But this particular expression of piety is not just something of the past that was observed by elderly people, as is the case in this photo. It is, in fact, an expression of piety of the modern world, the modern Orthodox world. And it is not only preserved by the elderly, but also the young people. So you have, to the present day, young people and old people. You have clergy and lay people alike who participate in this pious custom. The pilgrims, as they process around the church on their knees, will often be heard singing the Troparion of the Transfiguration in Slavonic. We continue to participate around the side of the church. Often groups of people will carry large crosses together. These might be part of one parish or a brotherhood or sisterhood or Orthodox youth group. You might be wondering what everyone does with their crosses once they've completed the pilgrimage. They plant those crosses in the hill surrounding the church. That is why Mount Grabarka is known as the Hill of Crosses. You have literally hundreds of thousands of crosses forming a forest of crosses on the hill. You have these little pathways through the forest of crosses. At the base of Mount Grabarka is a women's monastery, and the nuns maintain this forest of crosses. And also at the base of Mount Grabarka is a natural stream. This is where pilgrims will wash their knees and legs after participating in this pious pilgrimage. And so the next holiday, which is the last major holiday of the church year, is the Feast of the Dormition. The Dormition, or falling asleep of the Virgin Mary, depicted in this icon. Traditionally, Christ is shown receiving the soul of the Virgin Mary as a child. Once again, this icon is by the Polish iconographer Jerzy Nowosielski. However, we are not going to be celebrating the Dormition in Poland. We are going to be flying back to New York City. And we're going to go downtown to the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Nicholas. So this church has a particularly complicated history in the 21st century. The parish dates back to 1916, and it acquired this building, which was a residential building, to be repurposed as its parish church. As the 20th century progressed, New York City downtown changed all around it, including the building of the World Trade Center. So St. Nicholas Parish was literally in the shadow of the World Trade Center, which of course came down during the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. This is a photograph shortly after the South Tower was struck of St. Nicholas Parish. And this is actual footage of the church as the South Tower came down. Unfortunately, that attack completely destroyed the church. The church had a small relic of St. Nicholas, which was actually given to the parish by Tsar Nicholas of Russia shortly before the revolution. And that was lost in the rubble, but as Archbishop Demetrios of the Greek Archdiocese declared, this only further sanctifies the ground at the World Trade Center. So the new church took 21 years to build. It was completed in December of 2022, just in time for the Feast of St. Nicholas. It was designed by the Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava. The history, which is now the history of rebuilding in the 21st century, has been rather complicated, dealing with issues of finances, deals with the city, moving locations, all sorts of factors delayed the construction and completion of this church. But it was finally completed in 2022 according to a modern reinterpretation of the Hagia Sophia Cathedral of Holy Wisdom in Constantinople. So the church makes use of these very obvious ribbing. These ribs reflect the 40 ribs that make up the Hagia Sophia dome in Constantinople. Let's step inside. You have the dome, which also, again, has these 40 ribs, similar to the concept of how the Hagia Sophia dome was built, only in this modern reinterpretation, the ribs are a lot more accentuated. And the iconostasis, all of the icons and frescoes were completed by a monk from Mount Athos. And a major part of the design element is the illumination. And this is achieved by a very unusual and expensive technique, which requires the skeleton to be made out of concrete. And then with a little space in between, it is overlaid with very thin Greek marble. And then the lighting is in the center of that. Thus, the whole building from dome down to the foundation can be illuminated. So this has become a major symbol of rebirth, and there's a park surrounding the church. If you haven't been, it's definitely worth a pilgrimage there. This is likely the most visited Orthodox church in the United States. And just before we conclude, because this is a modern pilgrimage, we're going to travel into the future, and we're going to take off from Cape Canaveral. Just kidding. We are going to be going to Florida, to Deerfield Beach, which is located over here just north of Miami, to visit Holy Resurrection Cathedral. And thanks to modern technology, we have this rendering. The church has not been completed yet. The parish was founded in 2022 as St. Luke of Crimea Parish. It literally began with 12 people. The community now numbers in the hundreds. And so since 2020, there has been an effort to build this new cathedral. The design is directed by Russian-American architect Alexander Devitsky. The parish purchased this property, which had been a Protestant church, and the skeleton of the Protestant church will remain in the new design. But as you can see, there are traditional elements incorporated into this design, such as the onion domes. You have these very modernist decorative elements along the borders. That is oxidized copper. And you also have mosaics on the outside of the building. And I've been told that there are still mosaic icons that are not spoken for. So if anyone would like to donate, that is still possible. And now let us hear from our Metropolitan in terms of his thoughts on this endeavor.
We pray that this place is the future site of our Resurrection Cathedral here in Florida. There are many churches in Florida, many churches that are part of our diocese, but another church, a cathedral, will only add to the beauty of our Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. And we pray that God blesses our endeavors and the doors will be open to all Orthodox faithful to come and pray here and find their home, find each other, find salvation, and find God.
So I hope we can all make a pilgrimage to this church in 2027. I'd like to conclude with a quote from Patriarch Daniel of Romania. A pilgrimage is a spiritual event for all who participate in it with faith, piety, and love of God and the church. In a place of pilgrimage, we find not only what the place has to offer, that is, the holy church relics and divine services, but also what pilgrims bring with each other, namely their piety, zeal, patience, kindness, their way of being and meeting with God and with different people, some who have never known each other until that moment. Thank you very much. Thanks. Somebody want to put on the lights? Thank you. Somebody want to put on the lights? Lights, camera, action. Are there any questions? Yes. Well, it's all Eastern Orthodox Christianity. There are different styles of chant and singing. So the Albanian Orthodox Church generally preserves the Byzantine style of music, which is more what we think of as chant. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
You talked about St. Nicholas down at the Bookers.
Yes.
You said that it's the lighting in every panel, or is it in the center of the church and things like that?
No, it's within the walls of the church, between the concrete and the thin marble.
So in all of the walls, there's the lighting.
Yeah, there's from what I understand, there's a space between the wall and which is made out of concrete, and then the marble panels, which are on both sides, the inside and the outside.
What is the electric light, or what is
It is, yes, yeah. I don't know if that will be updated in the future, but yeah. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, too. And since you've all been patient, everyone join the reception. And as I said, this will be the final presentation of this season's lecture series. So please give generously to support our Synod community. There will be a basket next to the refreshment. Thank you very much.